Now the next part of the anatomy of larynx I am going to continue in this video. In the previous video, when we end up to the joints of the larynx, and now about the your extrinsic ligaments and intrinsic ligaments and muscles and especially the sinus and all this I will continue in this video. Now the next one is the ligaments. For the larynx, there are two types of ligaments. One is extrinsic and one is intrinsic. Extrinsic itself means the ligaments which are outside the laryngeal cavity, and intrinsic means inside the laryngeal cavity. Now there are three extrinsic ligaments. We know there is hyoid bone, we know there is epiglottis. Hyoid bone and epiglottis are connected by a ligament or by a membrane. Number second, hyoid bone and thyroid bone, they are connected with second membrane or ligament. And number third, they are also connected with a ligament. Now who is connected with whom? One is hyoid with epiglottis. So what could be the name of that? Hyoepiglottic, yes, hyoepiglottic fold or ligament. Second thing, thyroid is connected with hyoid, thyrohyoid membrane. And third one is with the cartilages, but even they are more important than these connections because they are forming the folds. They are forming the folds, and that is much important because those folds are working for the you can say sinus of the larynx. That is the main part of the larynx which is making the sound. And these two and all these, that is these membranes and these folds are playing a role there. Now the next is intrinsic. Intrinsic means inside. So these are the membrane or the ligaments which are just outside the mucous membrane of the larynx. Outside the mucous membrane of, you can say, sinus of the larynx. So this is the sinus of larynx. By this side and by this side, sinus remains intact. So these are the folds which are just lying outside the mucous membrane. Now this is the sinus. Now fold above the sinus is there and fold below the sinus is there. Now this fold above the sinus is called as quadrant membrane, whereas fold below the sinus is called as conus elasticus. Now this quadrant membrane, we will talk about each. The quadrant membrane is having relation with your arytenoid. Quadrant membrane, now this is cricoid. Here is one arytenoid and here is one arytenoid. From the arytenoid, a membrane extend. From the arytenoid, a membrane extend to the epiglottis. A membrane extend to the epiglottis, and this is called as quadrant membrane. Now this extending membrane, it has a thickened fold, and that is called as epiglottic fold. Now the lower portion, conus elasticus. So the conus elasticus is formed by a membrane which is extending from the lamina, of cricoid, and this lamina extend and it forms a membrane that is called as conus elasticus. This is a quadrant membrane. It has lower free border. This is quadrant membrane. The lower border of the quadrant membrane is free. There is no attachment. Whereas at the upper, it is attached with the epiglottis. This lower free border of the quadrant membrane, it forms a fold which is upper fold of the sinus, and that is called as vestibular fold, which is a part and parcel of the cavity of larynx or the sinus of larynx. Now this is the vestibular fold formed by quadrant membrane. Now there is one more fold. We know that conus elasticus a lower, and now this is extending from the lamina of cricoid. Now this extension leads to the anterior end of this conus elasticus, and this anterior end of the conus elasticus, it is also thickened, and this thickened anterior end forms a fold, and that is called as a vocal fold. So the vestibular fold is formed by quadrant membrane, the lower part, and the vocal fold is formed by conus elasticus, anterior part. Now the next part, and it is interesting part and rather little difficult to understand, and so I will try it so that you can have an absolute perfect idea exactly how it is. Let me start with the larynx. Larynx extends from the oropharynx up to the trachea. Oropharynx up to the trachea. Now the upper part of the larynx is inlet, and the lower part of the larynx at the trachea means at the cricoid, that is outlet. So inlet of larynx is oblique. Are you getting? It is oblique, it is not straight. Inlet of the larynx is oblique, and it is bonded anteriorly by, but naturally, the epiglottis. It is bonded anteriorly by the epiglottis, posteriorly by, now we are knowing this is cricoid. There are two small cartilages over the lamina of the cricoid, and those are known as arytenoid cartilages. Now this one arytenoid and this one arytenoid, they are united with each other, or they are connected with each other by a fold, by a membrane. Who are connected? Arytenoids. So the name of membrane is interarytenoid membrane. So it is posteriorly bonded by interarytenoid membrane. Anteriorly it is bonded by epiglottis. Now one more thing we are knowing, the epiglottis. In the last video we discussed that epiglottis is having, it is a leaf shaped cartilage, is having means you can say right and left borders. So these both right and left borders, now this is the epiglottis, this is cricoid, epiglottis, cricoid, and now here are the arytenoids. Now these arytenoids are giving the mucous membrane folds extensions to the epiglottis. Now the extension from one arytenoid and extension from another arytenoid, and these extensions we talked about quadrant membrane and conus elasticus. So quadrant membrane is a membrane which is at the upper part, and the conus elasticus is at the lower part. Quadrant membrane, it is the quadrant membrane extending from arytenoid to the epiglottis. Here is the epiglottis, border of the epiglottis, second border of the epiglottis, one fold from the arytenoid going to the border of epiglottis, second fold from the arytenoid going to the border of epiglottis. Now these two folds which are going to the epiglottis from each arytenoid, because arytenoid are the pair cartilages, so there are two from each arytenoid. The fold is going, upper part of the fold is attached with the epiglottis, whereas the lower border of the fold, it remains free. This lower border remains free, and this lower border of the fold, it forms a part of the sinus, and that is called as vestibular fold of the sinus. It is forming the vestibular fold. Now how many vestibular folds are there? One is formed by right and one is formed by left. So there are two vestibular folds. One is right vestibular fold and one is left vestibular fold. So this is about the upper part of the sinus. Upper part of the sinus is bonded by vestibular fold, or upper part of the sinus is formed by vestibular fold, and we know the lower part of the sinus, it is formed by vocal folds. Now how the vocal folds are formed? This is cricoid. Now here is the thyroid. Is it? This is the cricoid, here is the thyroid. Now this is one lamina of thyroid and another lamina of thyroid. Now what happened here? A membrane from the cricoid, lamina of the cricoid, a membrane from the lamina of the cricoid, it extends in this direction and in this direction. Are you getting? One to one lamina and another to another lamina. So one lamina and another lamina at the center of the lamina, up to the center of the lamina. This is extending in this direction and it is extending in this direction. And these two are attached, are up to the center. And now where they are attached, this fold is coming up to the angle of thyroid cartilage. This is one lamina, this is second lamina, and the center portion is angle, and here is notch. It is extending up to the angle of thyroid cartilage. One is attaching like this and second is attaching. Now again they are forming these type of folds. So these two folds are vestibular fold, and in the same sense at the upper part the quadrant membrane forms two folds, and those are called as vestibular, and lower folds are called as vocal folds. So this portion which is between these two folds, it is called as sinus of larynx. Now if I am talking about the cavity of larynx, now with the help of sinus of larynx or due to the sinus of larynx, I can divide the cavity into three parts. One is the sinus proper, second is the upper part, and third is the lower part. The portion which is above the sinus of larynx, it is quadrant, and the portion below the sinus, it is conus elasticus. Now this is the quadrant membrane and this is conus elasticus, and we are knowing the lower part of the quadrant membrane, it gets thickened and that forms a vestibular fold, whereas the anterior part of the conus elasticus, it again gets thickened and that forms the vocal fold. I mean to say there are two vestibular folds and there are two vocal folds. At the upper part of the sinus, two vestibular folds are there, and at the lower part of the sinus, two vocal folds are there. Now this is one vestibular fold and this is another vestibular fold. The space between these two vestibular folds, it is called as rima vestibuli. It is because the space is between two vestibular folds. It is called as rima vestibuli. In the same sense, the vocal folds, two vocal folds, one from one side of the cricoid to the thyroid and second from another side of the cricoid, lamina of the cricoid to the thyroid, and these two thickened anterior aspects of the your conus elasticus, and they are also two. Now the space between these two vocal folds, it is called as rima glottidis. There are two vestibular folds and two vocal folds. Now these two vestibular folds are lying parallel. These two vocal folds are lying parallel, and the space between these two vestibular folds and two vocal folds, it is the sinus of larynx. This space, it is the sinus of larynx. Now the next, muscles. The larynx has two types of muscles. Intrinsic means inside, and extrinsic. So intrinsic muscles of larynx are just running round and round two cartilages. One is cricoid and second one is the two cartilages, paired cartilages sitting on the top of cricoid. Those are arytenoid. Now the muscles concerned with the cricoid are three. One muscle which is going from cricoid to the thyroid. From where it is going? From cricoid. To where it is going? To thyroid. So what could be the name? Cricothyroid muscle. Now the small cartilages which are sitting, they are in need of a more support because they are moving. These two arytenoids, they are supported by intrinsic muscles from posterior side and from lateral side. From posterior side and from lateral side. The muscle which is toward the posterior but natural, it is called as, where it is? Posteriorly. To whom it is connecting? Cricoid to the arytenoid. Posterior cricoarytenoid muscle. and the muscle which is toward the lateral. Again the cricoid is connecting to the arytenoid toward the lateral side. So lateral cricoarytenoid muscle. So these are three muscles which are concerned with the cartilage, cricoid. Now the three muscles which are with the arytenoid. The three muscles which are with the arytenoid. Among these three, two muscles are connecting or helping to support both arytenoids. Means these two arytenoids are supported by two muscles. One is transverse muscle. One is transverse muscle which is running between two arytenoids. Means which is helping to connect one arytenoid with the another arytenoid at the transverse level. But it is not sufficient because the cartilages are smaller and they are having joint there, or they are sitting on the lamina of the cricoid. So there is more muscle needed, and that muscle is oblique. That muscle is oblique arytenoid. Oblique arytenoid. So from upper part of the arytenoid, muscle is going down and inserting at the lower part of the arytenoid. In the same sense, from upper part of another arytenoid, muscle is going down and inserted on the lower part of the arytenoid. So there are two muscles, among three, there are two muscles which are concerned with only arytenoid. One is transverse arytenoid and second one is oblique arytenoid. Now the third muscle is the muscle which is concerned with the arytenoid cartilage and thyroid cartilage. So that muscle is connecting, that muscle is taking origin from the thyroid cartilage and reaching to the arytenoid cartilage, and that muscle is called as thyroarytenoid muscle. So these are 6 intrinsic muscles. 3 are concerned with the cricoid and 3 are concerned with the arytenoid. So this is what about the intrinsic muscles of the larynx. Hope so the main part, that is sinus and vocal folds, hope so you are happy with that, and thanks for observing the video first part and second part. Actually larynx was divided into 2 parts because really it get hectic little to have a clear idea. And now one more thing, let me tell you, the role of teacher is to explain the things in a simple way. Nothing to do with the book and study and all this. That is your part. Our part is to explain the things so that you can perfectly understand. Now suppose you are observing the 2 videos of larynx. It is sure and certain that you are well familiar with the exact idea of the larynx. And if you are familiar with the idea of larynx, you can start writing the answer. In the answer, you can start the introduction. What larynx is exactly, and you are having absolute knowledge. Now start one by one. Put a heading there, the cartilages, and now write there are 3 paired and 3 unpaired cartilages, and write about each and every cartilage and draw a simple figure there. Draw a simple figure there so that I can put a fine impression. They are forming 2 joints, and both joints are formed by again the cricoid. Now the next one is the ligaments, about the cavity of larynx, and now last the muscles, intrinsic muscles of the, and now the blood supply, nerve supply. It is a part to study. In anatomy, you must follow the same. Understand the 70% of the topic and rectify remaining 30%. And then you will feel easy, you know, it is very best anatomy is you may get that bored that why you had taken that much tension of these all. Because understanding, once you get understand, you will never forget the topic. Thank you.